Hello, everyone. It's great to have you here with us. Oftentimes, consumers are faced with a dilemma where they're maybe dealing with a fraud or a dispute with an insurance firm, and it's not very clear how best to deal with the system so that the outcomes are positive on both ends. So, today we're here to discuss how the Ombud system works, and many South Africans are actually not aware of its inner workings. So, today's conversation is about unpacking that system. I'm joined by someone who sits at the helm and at the very center of shaping and strengthening the Ombud system. Leanne is the chief Ombud of the Ombud Council, and it's a very great pleasure to welcome you here on Asset TV, Leanne.
Hi, Musidi. It's lovely to be here. Thank you so much.
So, Leanne, let's start at a very practical level. If I'm an ordinary South African and something goes wrong, say, with a financial services provider, where does the Ombud system actually fit in the moment? And out of interest, who is it there for and how is it meant to work for me in real terms?
Well, the Ombud system is very much there for the financial customer, and in particular, the ordinary man on the street, the retail customer, which entails insurance policyholders, bank customers, people who've taken out credit, members of pension funds, people who've received financial advice. Pretty much all of us are a financial customer at some point. The Ombud system comprises a set of completely independent, impartial entities whose function is to resolve disputes in an informal way as an alternative to the complexities of the court processes. The beauty of the South African financial ombud system as well is that all of these ombud services are completely free of charge to complainants.
Thanks for that context. And you've been deeply involved in strengthening the system. And I think it might be of interest to our viewers to know that you were one of the brains behind treating customers fairly, and you're very passionate about it. But reform usually comes oftentimes, Leanne, when something's not working. So, in your view, where are the gaps or frustrations in the old system? Why were the changes necessary? And also, out of interest, you, since stepping into this role in 2022, what's the one shift that you've seen that kind of signals that there has been progress as a result of the changes to the system?
Mercedes, it's not so much that the system wasn't working before. I think there were several financial ombud schemes in place that had been doing a good job for several years, but the system was fragmented. There were too many schemes. They all operated somewhat differently and had different approaches, and this became very confusing for financial customers. So the National Treasury and the Financial Sector Conduct Authority several years ago commissioned the World Bank to undertake a review of the financial ombud system, and they produced a comprehensive diagnostic which told us in a very well-reasoned and evidence-based manner what we knew, which was that the fragmentation of the system needed sorting out, and the system therefore needed streamlining. We needed a much more consolidated ombud system, something that was much closer to a one-stop shop. So that has been one of the key areas of reform. There were also elements of the processes of the scheme that needed some tightening up, but it was really that big picture. So one of the key things that has happened since the Ombud Council became fully functional and I joined was helping to facilitate the consolidation of what used to be 4 different industry ombud schemes into one, known as the National Financial Ombud. So previously you had separate schemes for banking, credit, life insurance, and non-life insurance, and we had a total of 7 ombud schemes altogether. So you can imagine this is a little bit messy when you're trying to work out where to go. The consolidation of those 4 schemes into the NFO and the reduction of 7 schemes down to 3, because the NFO operates alongside additional statutory schemes for pensions on the one hand, through the pension funds adjudicator, and financial advice complaints on the other, being the phase ombud. There is one additional small scheme that deals with complaints in relation to the Joburg Stock Exchange. But all of that together is still not 100% perfect. We still need further refinement, but definitely a significant improvement. And it really is paying off to have the NFO consolidated. So to my mind, that was a highlight.
And just on that point, how does the system come together? How do the Ombud councils and the Ombud schemes and the FSCA and the National Treasury actually interact? Because we're going to have a further conversation with a representative of the FSCA and the Treasury to kind of unpack it, but it would be great to get some context as well.
Yeah, I think it is important to understand how the different players work together because there can be some confusion. I mean, all of the entities you've mentioned are part of the broader consumer protection landscape for financial services customers. The Treasury's role is to set the policy direction and to champion legislative changes of primary law through Parliament. So the National Treasury has published policy positions on in response to the World Bank recommendations that I mentioned, and they give us policy guidance. The FSCA and the Ombud Council are both regulators, but with separate mandates. The FSCA regulates the conduct of the financial institutions themselves, all the financial institutions, whereas the Ombud Council exercises oversight over the Ombud schemes. So we're not a scheme ourselves. We don't deal with complaints ourselves, but we're there to see that the Ombud schemes function smoothly and to support greater efficiency and alignment of the system and to boost awareness of the system, hence the kinds of conversation we're having today. So that's where the Ombud Council fits in. But then, of course, the key players are the Ombud schemes themselves, and they are the ones who handle the complaints from customers. So they are the primary access point for financial customers out there.
Within our Asset TV community, we're very familiar with the role that the pension funds adjudicator plays. And because we have a large number of advisors coming in to view our content, tell us a little bit around the phase aspect within the schemes and the systems, Leanne.
The Phase Ombud is one of the schemes that we oversee, and the Phase Ombud's primary mandate is to deal with complaints relating to financial advice and other intermediary services. The vast majority of the matters they deal with are financial advice matters. And I think what's important for your audience is even those who may not deal directly with retail customers, at the end of every piece of investment management advice you give, there's a human being sitting there, benefits, and the outcomes focused approach to consumer protection that the FSCA is busy driving, which I think we'll hear more about later, is very much about looking through to the effect on the end customer. And I think so the Phase Ombud is something that everyone should bear in mind. So yeah, the Phase Ombud too, but also the NFO, which looks after banking, credit, and insurance related complaints. Again, is key. And I think a message I always try to give to financial advisors is to say, don't think of the Ombud system as another regulator or another watchdog out there trying to give you a hard time and make your compliance life difficult. Think of the fact that an empowered customer is a confident customer and hence one more likely to benefit from your services and trust in them.
Absolutely. And also like it's a mutually kind of like it's there both for the advisor and for the consumer as well. Because oftentimes there's this misconception that it's in the favor of consumers only, I suppose.
No, and I think it's important to understand that the ombuds are there to be impartial and objective. Yeah. Of course, they do understand that the consumer is usually the David as compared to the Goliath, not in every instance, but most of the time. So they will be mindful of the fact that the consumer is the one whose voice needs to be heard, particular, but there is absolutely not a bias in either direction. And if one actually looks at the stats of complaint resolution, majority of complaints dealt with by Ombud schemes are actually found in favor of the financial institution Again, not because we then, if I'm talking to consumers, we sometimes then get the opposite accusation that, oh, the ombuds are not objective and they're on the side of the financial institutions. That is not true at all. But it does stand to reason that by the time someone complains to an ombud, their complaint should already have gone through quite a rigorous process within the financial institution itself.
Yeah, and my last question, Leanne, I think it's quite pointed in observing what's happening within the financial system. We see shifts in the risks that consumers face. There's the rise of betting and gambling in South Africa, but also very sophisticated fraud schemes, and many people are engaging with unregulated entities, especially in the gambling and the betting scene. So, which means that they're oftentimes not protected by the system that you've explained. From your perspective, what should consumers be aware of and be taking more of a proactive approach to ensure that when misconduct does occur, you can step in as the ombud system to help them?
Masidi, that is such an important point because the Ombud system and the Ombud scheme's mandate is to deal with complaints against regulated, licensed financial institutions and providers. So, complaints where people have fallen victim to unfair treatment by unregulated, unauthorized entities do reach the system. And sadly, the Ombud schemes cannot assist those customers. So, and would need to then refer them to other appropriate enforcement mechanisms or law enforcement, etc. And it's so important, therefore, to think very, very carefully before dealing with anyone unregistered. When you deal with a licensed provider, financial institution, or financial advisor, you have the automatic protection of the ombud system in those instances where things do go wrong. And of course, the much broader protection of knowing that the FSC is regulating them. So be incredibly careful. Scams are so sophisticated. They're becoming more and more sophisticated. I'm sure we'll hear more about this in the broader conversation later, but be ultra vigilant and never assume that it will not happen to you. Never assume that you are too sophisticated and knowledgeable. And even advisors fall prey to it. It's people. So I really caution people to heed all of those warnings and protections you get from entities like the FSCA and your banks and other institutions.
Well, thank you so much, Leanne. It's been really great to have you here with us to really, make sense of a system that is critical to better understand as consumers and FSPs. And to you, our viewers, we hope that you found this conversation very insightful. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Masidi.